So today I want to talk to you about when kids make errors when they're reading out loud. What should you do? Should you fix every error? Should you stop every time? Not all errors are made equal. Some errors are worth fixing in the moment, and some of them you can just let them go. So we're going to talk about the two differences there. Obviously, you're going to make a note of it in your head, and you're going to, teach it at a later time, or bring it up to them, or show them the phonics that are different. But in the moment, you don't need to fix every error. Okay? So there are some errors that I think are more valuable, like they have more weight. They're better errors than others. And here's what I mean. Maybe the sentence says, they went to their house. But your kid reads it, they went to their home. Maybe they don't say house, they say home, right? It's not the right word, but it means the same thing, and it makes sense in the sentence. That is a good error. That means that they're making meaning in their brain. They're not just trying to sound out the words. Yes, you're going to teach them later how the OU and house sounds, and when they see that letter pattern, what they're going to do. But in the moment, leave it. Because they're either looking at the pictures and noticing what's going on, or they're thinking about what the characters were already doing. So they're trying to fill in gaps by asking if it makes sense in that sentence. And that is a great error, okay? The errors that I think are worth fixing are the ones that don't make sense. Because then they can't keep up with the story. The story's changing because the word they put in doesn't make sense, okay? So I ask my kids a lot. My question to them is always, does that make sense? And I just let it hang. And I let them see if they can figure it out. And even if they give me a word that wasn't even close to how it looks, but it makes sense, I'll leave it. Do you know what I mean? The other errors, sometimes the question that we ask a lot more often, which I think is not as helpful, is that we say, maybe not a question, but the suggestion that we give our kids when they're reading out loud, we say, sound it out. Sound it out. Try it. What does it sound like? And the tough thing is, especially when they're beginning to learn to read, a lot of those words are not sound outable. It's a lot of sight words. It's not t, h, it's the. It's, what has a silent H in it. Where has a silent H in it. So many words. You has an O and a U. What does that do together? There's lots of different spelling patterns for those beginning sight words. They just have to kind of memorize some of those patterns. They're not really sound outable. So when we say sound it out and it's not sound outable, it's really confusing for them. So what I like to ask instead is, what makes sense? Or when they already make the error, if they've already passed it, I say, does that make sense? And that's when I'll ask them to stop and go back. But I try not to ask or try not to tell them to sound it out, because generally it's not super, super helpful unless it's a phonetic word. And sometimes those are later, longer words that are, have a prefix and a suffix and a middle part, and they know the individual little segments, they know the syllables, and I just say, okay, sound it out slowly, and that helps later on. But a lot of times in the beginning, it's what makes sense. Does that make sense in the sentence? Because there's a lot more pictures earlier on. There's a lot more clues in the story. Things are making sense. There's not a lot of extraneous details and things like that. So I want you to try that. When your kids are reading out loud, try that. Just try to ask them, does that make sense? Or what would make sense in the sentence? And then whatever their answer is, even if it wasn't close to what it was in the book, if it does make sense, I let it go. And I just go, okay, great, keep going. Because I want them to know that when they're reading on their own, they can use that strategy too. And maybe they won't figure out the exact word that was supposed to be on the page, but they're going to figure out something that makes sense. And then maybe later they can look it up, or, if something doesn't make sense later, they can go back to it. But really, we're trying to make sure that they understand that reading is all about making sense, not just sounding out words. Okay? I hope that was helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.